The sun was setting behind the tall music academy, painting the glass windows in gold. Inside, laughter and the sound of piano keys filled the air. Students were practicing for the big annual recital, the one event that brought the entire town together. Everyone was nervous and excited except for one person who wasn't supposed to be there. A young girl sitting quietly in the corner, her eyes following every movement on the grand piano. She was the cleaner's daughter. Every evening her mother came to the academy to tidy the rooms, wipe the floors, and polish the pianos until they shined like mirrors. The girl always came along, not because she wanted to, but because her mother had no one to leave her with. At first, she used to sit with a small book in her hand, pretending to read, but over time she found herself drawn to the sound of music echoing through the halls. Those melodies spoke to her in ways she couldn't explain. The teachers and students barely noticed her. To them, she was invisible, a quiet shadow who followed the cleaner around. But to the girl, this world of music was something magical. She watched the way the students moved their fingers across the keys, how they closed their eyes when they played, lost in another world. She could feel what they were trying to express even though she couldn't name the notes or read the sheets. When her mother swept under the benches or dusted the piano lids, the girl listened. She memorized sounds, the sharp notes, the soft ones, the patterns that repeated. She didn't have a piano at home, not even a keyboard, but sometimes she'd tap her fingers on the table, pretending to play, hearing the music in her imagination. Her mother often said, "Don't touch anything, my dear. We're just here to clean." And the girl always nodded, but her heart beat faster whenever she saw those black and white keys. She wanted to touch them so badly it almost hurt. One night, when the halls were empty and quiet, her mother went upstairs to clean the offices. The girl stood near the grand piano in the main hall. The lights were dim, and the only sound was the soft whir of the ceiling fan. She looked around, no one was there. Slowly, she lifted the piano lid. Her hands trembled as she pressed a single key. The sound was soft, but it filled the room like a whisper of something beautiful. She pressed another key, then another, and before she knew it, her fingers were moving on their own. She didn't know what she was doing. She was just following her heart. The melody came out uneven at first, but then it began to flow, like she had known it all her life. For a few minutes, she forgot who she was. She forgot the mop, the buckets, and the cleaning rags. All she knew was the music. When her mother returned, she froze at the sight. The girl immediately pulled her hands away, guilt flashing in her eyes. But instead of getting angry, her mother just stood there silent. After a long pause, she said softly, "You play beautifully." That was the first time anyone had said that to her. From that night onward, the girl waited for chances to touch the piano again. Sometimes when her mother was cleaning other rooms, she'd sneak in a few minutes of practice. She would replay the melodies she had heard during the day, trying to make sense of them. Her fingers began to remember things even her mind didn't fully understand. It was as if the music had always been inside her, waiting for the right moment to come alive. Weeks passed like that. The recital day grew closer, and everyone at the academy was on edge. The students worked hard to impress the judges. Some of them were from rich families and had been playing since they were children. They spoke about famous composers and competitions abroad. To them, music was a career. To the girl, it was something deeper, a voice she didn't know she had. One evening, as the girl sat quietly while her mother mopped the floor, she noticed a student struggling to play a difficult piece. The teacher scolded him for missing notes, and he stormed out in frustration. When the room was empty again, the girl slowly walked up to the piano. She remembered every note the student had played wrong. Taking a deep breath, she started to play it, softly at first, then with growing confidence. The tune came alive, flowing perfectly this time. Unbeknownst to her, someone was standing by the door. It was the old janitor who worked late nights fixing lights and carrying chairs. He listened quietly, amazed by what he was hearing. When she finished, she turned around and gasped when she saw him. She expected him to be angry or to tell her mother. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "You have a gift. Don't hide it." His words gave her courage. She began to practice more often, still in secret. Every note she played came from what she remembered by ear. She didn't need sheet music. She could hear the rhythm in her head and feel it in her heart. She learned songs by listening to the rehearsals of the academy's best students, then recreating them later, alone in the quiet hall. But even as her confidence grew, she knew her place. She was the cleaner's daughter. No one would take her seriously. People at the academy didn't even know her name. They only knew her mother, the woman who polished the floors and smiled politely but was never part of their world. Sometimes, while helping her mother carry cleaning supplies, she would walk past the posters for the recital. The pictures of students in elegant clothes smiling proudly made her wonder what it must feel like to be up there on that stage. The lights, the applause, the audience waiting in silence for the first note. It seemed like a dream that didn't belong to her. But dreams have a way of finding those who truly believe. One night, as she played alone again, her fingers dancing across the keys, she didn't know that a teacher had entered the room. The teacher stopped in her tracks, unable to believe what she was hearing. The music was full of emotion, raw, powerful, and pure. It wasn't the sound of someone trained by years of lessons. It was the sound of someone who felt every note. The teacher didn't interrupt. She just stood there listening until the last note faded. When the girl finally noticed her, she froze in fear. Her hands dropped from the piano as her heart raced. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was just—" But the teacher raised a hand and said softly, "Don't apologize. That was extraordinary." The girl didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her music extraordinary before. She expected to be scolded or told to leave. Instead, the teacher asked, "Who taught you to play like that?" The girl hesitated, then said, "No one. I just listen." The teacher's eyes softened with disbelief and wonder. She could see it clearly when this wasn't just talent. It was something rare, something born from the heart. "You should play for people," the teacher said quietly. "They need to hear this." The girl shook her head quickly. "I can't, they'll laugh. I'm not a student here." But the teacher smiled gently. "Maybe not yet." That night, as the girl and her mother walked home, the teacher's words echoed in her mind. She looked at her hands and whispered to herself, "Maybe one day." The world still saw her as the cleaner's daughter, someone meant to stay in the background. But inside her, something had changed. For the first time, she believed there might be a place for her in that world of shining lights and music. She didn't know it yet, but the next few days would bring a chance that would change her life forever. The morning after that quiet encounter, the girl couldn't stop thinking about what the teacher had said. The words repeated in her mind again and again. "You should play for people." It sounded impossible, almost foolish. People didn't listen to girls like her. They didn't care about the daughter of a cleaner. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she could do it. Her mother noticed that something was different. The girl seemed lost in thought all day, her eyes brighter than usual. When her mother asked what was going on, she only smiled and said, "Nothing, just thinking." She didn't want to get her hopes up or make her mother worry. After all, the teacher might forget about her by tomorrow, but the teacher didn't forget. The next evening, when they arrived for cleaning, the teacher was waiting near the main hall. She smiled kindly at the girl and said, "I spoke to the director about you. He wants to hear you play." The girl froze, not sure if she had heard correctly. "The director?" she asked in disbelief. "Yes," the teacher replied. "He doesn't believe me yet, but I told him what I heard. There's a small audition tomorrow afternoon. One of the recital performers dropped out. I want you to try." The girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She had never played in front of anyone except her mother and the old janitor. The thought of playing for the director made her stomach twist in fear. "But I can't read music," she said softly. "That doesn't matter," the teacher replied. "Play from your heart. That's what you do best." The teacher left soon after, and the girl stood there in shock. Her mother was speechless when she found out. "Oh, my dear," she said quietly, touching her daughter's face. "I don't know if this is a good idea. People can be unkind. They might laugh." The girl nodded. She understood, but something in her heart told her she had to try. "Let me just play once, Mama, just once." The next day felt longer than ever. Every hour at school dragged by. Every minute felt heavy with nerves. When her mother finished work that afternoon, the girl changed into her cleanest clothes, a plain white blouse and a faded skirt. Her mother had ironed them carefully that morning. They were simple, but they made her feel brave. When they entered the hall, the director was already there, sitting with a few teachers. He looked serious, his glasses reflecting the light. "So this is the girl?" he asked. The teacher nodded proudly. "Yes, this is her." The director folded his arms. "All right, young lady. Let's hear what you've got." The girl walked slowly to the piano. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought everyone could hear it. She sat down, her fingers trembling over the keys. She looked at the teacher, who smiled encouragingly. Then she took a deep breath and began to play. At first her hand shook and a few notes slipped out wrong. But as the melody took shape, she forgot her fear. The music filled the hall like sunlight breaking through clouds. Every sound carried emotion, hope, sadness, love, and something that couldn't be described with words. The teachers stopped whispering. Even the director leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her hands. When the last note faded, silence covered the room. No one moved for a moment. Then the teacher began to clap softly. The others followed. The director didn't clap right away. He just stared at her, speechless. Finally, he said, "You've never taken a lesson before?" She shook her head. "No, sir." The director stood up slowly. "Incredible," he murmured. "You play like someone who has lived inside the piano." The teacher smiled with pride. "I told you she was special." The director nodded thoughtfully. "The recital is tomorrow night. One of our students dropped out due to illness. If she's willing, she can take the spot." The girl blinked in shock. "You mean perform? On stage?" "Yes," he said simply. "If you want it." Her mother gasped quietly, her hands pressed to her mouth. She looked at her daughter, uncertain. "My dear, this is too much. You're not ready for that." But the teacher spoke gently. "Sometimes we're more ready than we think." The girl looked at her mother and whispered, "Please, just one chance." Her mother hesitated, then finally nodded. "All right, but no matter what happens, I'll be proud of you." That night, the girl couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, her heart filled with excitement and fear. What if she made a mistake? What if people laughed? What if she froze in front of everyone? But then she remembered how it felt to play when no one was watching, how the music made everything else disappear. Maybe she could find that feeling again, even on stage. The next day, the academy was buzzing with energy. Students rushed around, practicing their pieces and adjusting their outfits. The girl watched from the side, clutching her hands together. She had never seen so many people dressed so beautifully. The hall was decorated with flowers, and a grand chandelier sparkled above the stage. The teacher guided her backstage and said softly, "Don't worry about them. Just close your eyes and play like you always do." She nodded nervously. Her mother was sitting near the back of the hall, dressed modestly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked nervous but proud. When the performance began, each student went up one by one. The music was beautiful, polished, practiced, perfect. The audience clapped politely after each piece. But as the evening went on, a murmur spread through the crowd when they saw the small girl step onto the stage in her simple dress. Some people whispered to each other. A few smiled kindly, but others looked confused. "Who is she?" someone asked. "She's the cleaner's daughter," another whispered. "The director's letting her play?" The girl heard some of the whispers and her heart pounded harder. She wanted to run away, but then she saw her mother's face in the crowd, calm, steady, filled with love. That was enough. She sat at the piano. For a moment she just breathed, her fingers hovering over the keys. Then she remembered the teacher's words. "Play like you always do." She closed her eyes and began. The sound that came out was soft at first, like a secret being told. Then it grew stronger, filling the hall with emotion that none of the trained students had brought. The audience, which had been whispering seconds ago, fell completely silent. Each note carried her heart, her dreams, her pain, her love for her mother, her longing for a world beyond what she knew. The music soared, then softened, like waves washing over the listeners. Her small fingers danced effortlessly, but it wasn't about skill. It was about feeling. When she played, she wasn't the cleaner's daughter anymore. She was someone who belonged to the music. When the final note faded, there was a pause, long, breathless. Then, all at once, the audience rose to their feet. The applause thundered through the hall. Some people even had tears in their eyes. The girl sat frozen, unsure of what to do. She had never seen people clap for her before. Her mother stood up too, clapping the loudest, tears running down her cheeks. The teacher smiled proudly from the side of the stage. Even the director, who had been so stern before, was standing and applauding. The girl stood up slowly and bowed. Her heart was racing, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from joy. After the show, many people came to speak to her. Reporters wanted to know who she was, where she had learned to play. The director explained that she had no teacher, no training, just passion and a gift. The crowd couldn't believe it. When she finally found her mother backstage, she ran into her arms. Her mother hugged her tightly and whispered, "You did it, my dear. You really did it." The teacher approached them with a gentle smile. "You changed many hearts tonight," she said. "The director wants to speak with you tomorrow about something important." The girl looked up wide-eyed. "Something important?" The teacher nodded. "Yes, but for now, just rest. You've earned it." As they walked home under the quiet night sky, the girl held her mother's hand. The city lights twinkled around them, but her heart felt brighter than all of them. For the first time, she believed she might have a real place in that big, beautiful world of music, and she had no idea that this performance was only the beginning of something far greater waiting ahead. The next morning, the girl woke up early. She hadn't slept much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the sound of applause ringing in her ears. It felt like a dream, one she didn't want to end. Her mother was already in the kitchen making tea. When their eyes met, both of them smiled. Neither of them needed to say anything. They both knew something had changed forever. As they walked to the academy that day, the morning sun painted the streets in soft gold. The girl clutched her mother's hand tightly. People on the street looked at her differently now. Some of them recognized her face from the performance. Others smiled as they passed, whispering to each other, "That's the girl who played last night." When they reached the academy, students were already talking about the recital. The hallways buzzed with excitement. The girl could feel eyes on her as she walked past. Some students smiled kindly, but others whispered with surprise and disbelief. "Can you believe she played like that?" one said. "She's just the cleaner's daughter," another replied. "How could she be that good?" The girl pretended not to hear, though every word stung a little. She wasn't used to attention, good or bad. But then she saw the teacher who had believed in her standing at the end of the hallway, smiling warmly. That gave her courage. The director was waiting for her in his office. He stood up when she and her mother entered. His expression was softer this time, no longer cold or distant. "Please come in," he said. "You gave quite a performance last night." The girl bowed her head shyly. "Thank you, sir." He looked at her mother and then at her again. "We've never seen anything like that. You play with emotion most trained musicians spend years trying to find. We would like to offer you a full scholarship to study here." Her mother gasped, covering her mouth. The girl blinked in shock. "A scholarship?" she whispered. The director nodded. "Yes, you'll learn properly with teachers and lessons. All the expenses will be covered." "It's the least we can do for someone with your gift." The girl didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled as she looked at her mother. Tears filled her mother's eyes. "Thank you," she said softly. "You have no idea what this means to us." For the first time, the girl wasn't just the cleaner's daughter anymore. She was a student of the academy. The following weeks were like stepping into another world. The girl got her own uniform and books. She attended classes with other students who had been playing since they were small. At first, she felt out of place. The others had fancy instruments, private tutors, and years of experience. She had only her heart and her ears, but she listened carefully in every lesson. She practiced until her fingers ached. The teachers were amazed by how quickly she learned. What others took weeks to master, she could pick up in days. She had a gift that couldn't be taught, the ability to feel the music deeply, to turn every note into a story. Still, not everyone accepted her easily. Some students whispered behind her back. "She's lucky," one girl said. "She didn't earn her place." Others ignored her completely. The girl didn't respond to their words. She let her music speak for her. One afternoon after class, she was sitting alone in the practice room when one of the older students walked in. He was known for being talented and proud. "You think you're special, don't you?" he said sharply. "Just because the director likes your little story." The girl looked down at her hands. "No, I don't think that," he smirked. "Then prove it. There's a competition next month. Let's see if you can play as well as everyone says." She didn't answer right away. The thought of another performance scared her, but she nodded slowly. "All right, I'll try." After he left, she sat quietly for a long time. Her heart was racing, but not from fear and from determination. She wanted to show everyone that her music wasn't a one-time miracle. It was who she truly was. Her teacher helped her prepare. Together, they chose a piece that was both beautiful and challenging. Every day after classes ended, she stayed late to practice. The janitor often passed by and smiled. "You never give up, do you?" he said kindly. She smiled back. Not this time. Her mother noticed how hard she worked. Sometimes when the girl came home with sore fingers, her mother would hold her hands gently. "Don't push yourself too much," she would say. But the girl only smiled. "I'm not tired, Mama, I'm happy." Days turned into weeks, and soon the competition day arrived. The auditorium was full again, but this time the atmosphere was different. The event wasn't as grand as the recital, but there were judges, guests, and families watching. The girl felt nervous as she waited backstage, hearing the other performers play before her. Their music was flawless, full of skill. But she noticed something. Though they played perfectly, many of them didn't feel the music. It sounded beautiful but empty. When her turn came, she walked onto the stage quietly. The audience murmured when they saw her. Some recognized her from the recital. The judges looked curious. She sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and began. The first notes were gentle, almost shy, but soon her confidence grew. Her fingers moved with grace, each touch filled with meaning. She played not to impress, but to express. Every part of her soul poured out through the piano. The music rose and fell like waves, calm one moment, powerful the next. The audience leaned forward, listening closely. When she finished, silence filled the room once again. Then came the applause, strong, sincere, and full of admiration. The judges exchanged glances, clearly moved. The girl stood and bowed politely, her cheeks glowing with pride and relief. Later that evening, when the results were announced, her name was called for the top prize. She couldn't believe it. She had won. Her teacher hugged her tightly, saying, "You've earned every bit of this." Her mother, who had been watching from the crowd, wiped tears from her eyes. The older student who had challenged her walked up after the ceremony. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, with a small nod, he said, "You were amazing." The girl smiled. "Thank you." That night, as she and her mother walked home under the stars, she couldn't stop smiling. Her mother looked at her proudly and said, "Do you know why people love your music?" The girl shook her head. "Why?" "Because you play with heart. That's something no one can teach." The girl thought about that for a long time. Maybe that was true. Maybe what made her different wasn't skill or training, but the feeling she put into every note. It was the same feeling that had carried her from those quiet nights in the empty hall to this moment. The belief that music was meant to be felt, not just played. As they reached home, her mother turned to her and said softly, "Your life is changing, my dear, but never forget where you came from." The girl nodded. She looked at her hands, the same hands that once hesitated to touch a piano key, now capable of moving hearts. She smiled and whispered, "I won't forget, Mama. I promise." The academy began treating her differently after that competition. The whispers turned into admiration. Students who once ignored her now asked her for help. The director often mentioned her story to inspire others. But through it all, she stayed humble. Every time she played, she still saw the face of her mother, tired yet proud, cleaning the halls where it all began. And late at night, when everyone had gone home, she sometimes returned to the same piano where her journey had started. She would sit there quietly, her fingers gliding over the keys, playing not for applause, not for prizes, but for the love of the sound that had changed her life. She didn't know what the future would bring. More stages, more challenges, more people to prove herself to. But deep inside, she knew one thing. No matter how far she went, she would always be that same girl who listened, learned, and believed when no one else did. Months passed, and the girl's life continued to change in ways she never imagined. Her days were filled with lessons, rehearsals, and quiet moments of practice. Each time her fingers touched the piano, she felt closer to her dreams. But no matter how far she went, she always remembered the long nights when she sat quietly while her mother cleaned the halls. Those memories kept her grounded. The academy had begun to take pride in her story. She was no longer just a student. She was proof that true talent could come from anywhere. People came to watch her perform at small events and student showcases. The local newspaper even wrote about her. "Cleaner's daughter wins music competition." The article made her proud, but it also made her nervous. She didn't like attention. She just wanted to play. One morning, the director called her to his office again. When she entered, he was speaking to a man she had never seen before. The man wore a dark suit and carried a briefcase. He smiled when he saw her. "So this is the young pianist everyone's talking about," he said. The director nodded. "This is the girl I told you about. She's remarkable." The man turned to her. "My name is Mr. Howard. I organize youth music festivals across the country. We'd like you to represent the Academy at the National Festival next month. It's a great honor. Only the best students are invited." Her heart skipped a beat. "The National Festival?" She repeated softly. "Yes," he said with a kind smile. "It's a big stage. Musicians come from all over. If you perform well there, it could open doors to a future you've never imagined." The girl looked at the director, unsure. "But I'm not as trained as the others. Maybe someone else should go." The director shook his head. "You've earned this. You're ready." Her mother was overwhelmed when she heard the news. "My dear, that's incredible," she said, her voice trembling with pride. "But are you sure you can handle it?" "It's such a big event," the girl smiled. "I'm nervous, but I'll do my best." For the next few weeks, she practiced harder than ever before. The teacher who had first discovered her helped her prepare. Together, they chose a piece that told a story, one that began softly like a whisper, then grew into something powerful and full of hope. "Play this like you're telling them your journey," the teacher said. "Make them feel who you are." Every evening after lessons, the girl would stay late in the empty hall, playing until the janitor turned off the lights. Sometimes her mother came to watch, sitting quietly in the corner, smiling proudly as her daughter's music filled the room. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The event was held in a large concert hall in another city. It was the biggest place she had ever seen. The hall glittered with lights and the audience stretched far into the distance. Her hands shook as she looked around backstage at the other performers, confident young pianists in fine clothes chatting easily with one another. She stood quietly, holding her small music notebook, trying not to feel out of place. When her turn came, she took a deep breath and walked toward the stage. The lights were bright, almost blinding. She could barely see the crowd. Her heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the sound of her own footsteps. She sat at the piano and waited for the noise in the hall to fade. For a moment, she thought about everything that had brought her here. Her mother cleaning late at night. The teacher who believed in her. The first time she touched the keys. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The music started softly, almost like a secret. The audience leaned in to listen. Her fingers moved gracefully, every note flowing naturally into the next. As she played, the sound grew stronger, fuller, like a wave gathering strength. The hall was silent except for her music. She poured her heart into every chord, every phrase, until it felt as though time itself had stopped. When the final note faded, she kept her hands on the keys, her eyes still closed. The silence that followed was deep and full. Then came the applause, loud, endless, and full of emotion. People stood up from their seats. The judges clapped too. She looked up, surprised, and saw her mother in the audience wiping away tears. After the performance, many people came to congratulate her. Musicians from other cities told her she had something rare, not just skill but soul. A famous pianist even approached her and said, "You remind me of why I started playing in the first place." Those words stayed with her. That evening, after the award ceremony, she sat with her mother outside the hall, watching the city lights. Her mother took her hand and said softly, "You played from your heart again. That's all I ever hoped for you." The girl leaned against her shoulder. "Mama, do you think I really belong here?" Her mother smiled. "You belonged the moment you touched those keys." When they returned home, life at the academy changed once more. The teachers spoke of her performance with pride, and younger students began to look up to her. Some asked for her advice, and she always helped kindly, remembering how it felt to be invisible. But with fame came pressure. Invitations started to arrive from different places: music schools, competitions, even television shows. The director wanted her to take advantage of every opportunity, but she began to feel torn. She didn't want to lose the simple joy she felt when playing alone at night. She didn't want her music to become something she did only to please others. One afternoon, while she was practicing, the teacher who had always guided her came into the room. "You seem troubled," the teacher said gently. The girl hesitated. "Everyone wants something from me now. I'm grateful, but it's a lot." The teacher smiled softly. "Fame is loud, but the heart of music is quiet. Don't let the noise around you drown your own voice. Play for the same reason you always have, Kearney, because you love it." The girl nodded. "Thank you." I needed to hear that. As the weeks passed, she continued to perform, but she made sure to keep moments just for herself. Sometimes, after everyone left, she would sit alone in the empty hall and play softly, just like she used to when her mother cleaned. The janitor, now older and slower, often sat nearby, listening quietly. "Still the same sound," he would say with a smile.
"Still from the heart," she smiled back.
That's how it began. That's how it will always be. One day, the director called her to his office once again. "You've been invited to perform abroad," he said. "A special program in Europe for young prodigies. It's a great chance for you to grow." The girl listened quietly. She had never been outside her country. The idea was exciting but also scary. "What about my mother?" she asked softly. The director smiled. "Of course she can come with you." When she told her mother, tears of joy filled her mother's eyes. "I never thought this would happen," she whispered. "From cleaning those halls to traveling across the world, you've made our dreams come true." The day they left, the academy gathered to say goodbye. The teacher hugged her and said, "Remember who you are. No matter where you go, never forget where your music was born." As their plane took off, the girl looked out the window. The city grew smaller beneath the clouds. She thought about her old life, the quiet nights, the dusty floors, the hidden melodies she once played in secret. Now she was heading toward a future she could barely imagine. But one thing was certain: the sound of her mother's broom, the echo of her first note in the empty hall, and the warmth of every kind smile would always stay with her. Because her story wasn't just about rising from humble beginnings. It was about never losing the heart that made her music real. She closed her eyes as the clouds drifted by, her mind already full of new melodies. Somewhere inside her, she knew this was only the beginning of another chapter. One that would take her to new stages, new audiences, and new dreams. But no matter how far she went, she would always be the cleaner's daughter who believed in the music of her heart. The girl and her mother arrived in Europe full of anticipation and nervous excitement. The city they were in was unlike anything she had ever seen. Wide streets lined with old buildings, cafes spilling out onto the sidewalks, and the soft hum of music drifting through the air. The girl clutched her small suitcase, her fingers brushing against the worn edges of the notebook where she had written her first melodies. Everything felt so big, so overwhelming, and yet somehow familiar because music had always guided her steps. The program organizers welcomed them warmly. They were impressed not only by the girl's talent but also by her story. People were curious about the child who had come from a small music academy in her hometown. A girl who had never taken lessons yet, played with the heart of a seasoned musician. For the first few days, she attended rehearsals, met the other young prodigies, and explored the grand concert hall where she would perform. The space was huge, with ceilings that seemed to touch the sky and walls adorned with paintings of famous composers. Even among so much talent, the girl felt small. Some of the other performers were confident, polished, and clearly trained from early childhood. They spoke multiple languages and knew every piece of music by heart. She watched them, listening carefully, observing their techniques and wondering if she truly belonged there. But whenever she sat at the piano, all her doubts melted away. Her fingers moved as if they had a life of their own, guided by the years of hidden practice she had done in quiet halls back home. The night of her first performance abroad arrived faster than she expected. She wore a simple dress carefully chosen by her mother and walked onto the stage with her mother watching proudly from the front row. The audience was immense, filled with people from different countries all gathered to hear music. She felt the weight of expectation, but she also felt a thrill, the kind of excitement that comes when you know you are exactly where you're meant to be. As she began to play, she closed her eyes. The world fell away, leaving only her and the music. Each note told a story, of long nights in empty halls, of her mother's gentle encouragement, of her own secret dreams. The audience listened in rapt silence. Her fingers danced across the keys, not with the precision of someone trained for years, but with the depth of someone who truly felt every sound. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, and the standing ovation lasted longer than she could imagine. Tears filled her eyes as she bowed to the crowd. After her performance, she was surrounded by journalists, photographers, and other young musicians. People asked questions, snapped photos, and wanted to hear her story. The girl felt nervous but proud. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "You've shown them who you are, my dear." The following days were filled with more rehearsals, performances, and cultural experiences. The girl learned new pieces, collaborated with other musicians, and even had the chance to explore the city. Every moment was a mix of excitement and challenge. Sometimes she struggled with the pressure, the unfamiliar environment, and the feeling of being watched constantly, but she reminded herself of the empty halls back home, the nights she had spent practicing alone, and the teacher who believed in her. That thought gave her strength. One afternoon during a break, she wandered into a quiet part of the city. She found a small music shop filled with old instruments. Inside, an elderly man tuned a grand piano. When he noticed her, he smiled warmly and asked if she would like to play. Hesitant at first, she sat down and began to play one of her favorite pieces. The man listened intently, nodding as she played. When she finished, he said softly, "You have something rare, not just talent, but a gift that touches people's hearts." The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. His words reminded her that her music was not just about winning competitions or receiving applause. It was about connecting with people, telling stories without words, and sharing a piece of her soul. Back at the program, she had a chance to perform with an orchestra. The experience was unlike anything she had done before. Coordinating with so many musicians required focus and collaboration, and at first she was nervous about keeping up. But as the music began, she felt a sense of belonging she had never felt before. The orchestra moved with her, and together they created a sound that filled the hall with beauty and emotion. When the performance ended, the audience erupted in applause. She realized that music was not just about individual talent, but about creating something together, something larger than oneself. Throughout the festival, the girl also met other young musicians who shared their stories. Many came from prestigious music schools and had trained since they were very young. They were amazed by her journey and often said they had never met someone who learned purely by ear and emotion. These encounters inspired her. She realized that everyone had their own path, and her own story, humble beginnings, hidden practice, and unwavering belief, had brought her to this moment. One evening, after a particularly long day of rehearsals, the girl and her mother walked along the river that ran through the city. The water reflected the golden glow of the streetlights, and the sounds of distant music floated on the breeze. Her mother took her hand and said, "You've grown so much, my dear. From cleaning halls to performing on these stages, you've amazed everyone, including me." The girl smiled softly. "Mama, I feel like I'm learning more than just music. I'm learning about courage, patience, and believing in myself." Her mother nodded. "And don't ever lose that, no matter where your music takes you." The festival concluded with a grand gala, where all the young musicians performed together. The girl was part of the closing performance, playing a piece she had composed herself. It was inspired by her journey, the quiet nights, the dusty halls, the love of her mother, and the thrill of discovering her gift. As she played, she felt the presence of everyone who had believed in her, even when the world hadn't noticed her before. When the final note faded, the hall erupted in applause. The audience rose to their feet. Some people even cried, moved by the emotion in her music. She looked at her mother, who was smiling proudly, and then at the other young musicians who nodded in respect and admiration. It was a moment she would never forget. After returning home, life slowly settled into a new rhythm. The girl continued to study at the academy, now recognized not only as a student but as an inspiration to others. Younger students often sought her advice, and she always shared it with kindness and patience. Her story spread beyond the academy, encouraging children and parents to believe that talent could flourish anywhere, even in unlikely circumstances. Despite all the recognition, the girl remained humble. She continued to practice in quiet halls, sometimes alone, just as she had when she was the cleaner's daughter. She understood that her gift was not about fame or applause, but about the joy of creating and sharing music from the heart. Every time she sat at the piano, she remembered the beginning, the first notes she had played in an empty hall, the encouragement of her teacher, and the love of her mother. Her journey had taught her more than music. It had taught her resilience, humility, and the power of believing in oneself. No matter what opportunities or challenges lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Music was her voice, and she would continue to let it speak, touching hearts wherever she went. Years passed. And the girl who had once been the cleaner's daughter had grown into a remarkable young musician. Her journey had taken her from small halls and empty rooms to grand concert stages across the world. Yet no matter how far she traveled or how many people admired her music, she remained grounded. She remembered every moment that had brought her to this point. Her mother's tireless work, the teacher who had believed in her, and the quiet nights spent learning and listening. After returning from Europe, she continued her studies at the academy. She took lessons from the finest teachers and learned new techniques, but she never lost her unique style, the way she played with heart and emotion. The students who had once whispered about her now respected her deeply. Some of them even sought her guidance, and she gladly shared what she had learned, never forgetting what it felt like to start from nothing. One day, the academy invited her to give a special performance for local children. Many of them came from humble backgrounds just like she had. When she looked into their eyes, she saw the same wonder and curiosity she had felt as a child. She played a gentle melody, one that told a story without words, and the children listened in silence, captivated by the sound. After she finished, they clapped enthusiastically, some even cheering. A young girl ran up to her afterward, shyly saying, "I want to play like you someday." The girl smiled, kneeling down to the child's level. "You can," she said softly. "If you love it and practice with your heart, anything is possible." Her mother watched from the back of the room, her eyes filled with pride. She had always believed in her daughter, and now the world could see the brilliance she had known all along. Despite her growing fame, the girl made sure to keep her life simple. She still visited her old neighborhood, walked the streets where she had grown up, and spent time with people who had supported her quietly along the way. She knew that staying connected to her roots kept her music real and her heart humble. One afternoon, she received an invitation from an international foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged children. They wanted her to become an ambassador, sharing her story to inspire young musicians everywhere. The girl was moved by the idea. She remembered herself, the quiet nights, the fear of performing, the endless hours of practice without anyone watching. If her story could encourage even one child to follow their dreams, it would be worth it. Traveling for this new role brought her to distant cities and countries. She performed in schools, orphanages, and small community centers. Everywhere she went, she saw the same spark in children's eyes, a spark that reminded her of her own beginnings. She encouraged them to believe in themselves, to listen closely, and to never give up no matter how difficult life seemed. In one small town, she met a boy who could not speak. He sat quietly in the corner, watching her with wide eyes. After she played, he reached out to touch the piano keys, and a faint melody came from him. The girl smiled and guided his hands gently, showing him that music was a way to communicate when words failed. His face lit up, and for the first time she saw a connection between their hearts. That moment stayed with her forever. Through these experiences, the girl realized that music was not just about talent or fame. It was about touching lives, creating hope, and giving others a voice. She thought about her own life and how many doors had opened simply because someone had believed in her. She knew she had a responsibility to pass that belief on. Back at the academy, she continued to grow as a musician. She composed her own pieces, blending her experiences, emotions, and stories into music that moved audiences deeply. Her concerts began to fill larger halls, attracting listeners who came not only for her skill, but for the passion that flowed from every note. Critics praised her, but she remained humble, always crediting her mother, her first teacher, and the quiet moments that had shaped her. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she walked off stage to see her mother waiting for her. They hugged tightly, tears in both of their eyes. "I never imagined this," her mother whispered. "From the halls we cleaned to these stages. You've created a life I could never have dreamed of." The girl smiled, holding her mother's hands. "Mama, it's all because you believed in me. You showed me what love and patience could do. I would not be here without you." The girl's story began to reach even farther than she could have imagined. Invitations came from schools, foundations, and television programs. People wanted to hear her speak, to share her journey, and to understand how she had overcome the obstacles of her past. She spoke with honesty, always emphasizing that it was not only talent but hard work, courage, and faith in oneself that made the difference. Despite all the recognition, she never let herself forget the quiet moments that had shaped her. Late at night, she still returned to practice, sometimes alone, sometimes with a small group of students. The joy of creating music remained her guiding light. She found peace in those moments, a connection to her roots that reminded her why she had started. One day, the director of the academy, now older, approached her with a thoughtful look. "You've inspired countless students and musicians," he said. "But what matters most is that you never lost your heart. Many could have lost themselves in fame, but you've stayed true to who you are." The girl nodded, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I try to remember that every day. Music is more than performance. It's life, love, and hope all at once." As the years continued, she performed all over the world, met countless people, and shared her music with thousands. She taught, guided, and encouraged the next generation of musicians. And through it all, she remained the girl who had once been invisible, the daughter of a cleaner who had believed in the power of music. Her life became a story of hope, proof that talent could come from anywhere, that determination could overcome obstacles, and that love and belief could transform a life. Wherever she went, she inspired others to follow their dreams, just as she had been inspired once. And in quiet moments, when the world was still, and the piano keys beneath her fingers felt familiar and comforting, she played not for applause, not for recognition, but for the love of music itself. She played for the girl she once was, for the mother who never stopped believing, and for everyone who needed a reminder that dreams could come true, no matter where they started. In the end, the cleaner's daughter, who had once hesitated to play in empty halls, had become a symbol of courage, hope, and the magic of music. Her story would live on, echoing through concert halls, classrooms, and hearts around the world. A testament to the truth that sometimes the smallest voices can create the most extraordinary music.